When loyalty is tested and desire spirals out of control, who is truly the betrayer, and who is the betrayed? Weddings are meant to be joyous occasions, full of love, laughter, and celebration. My brother's wedding was no different. The venue was breathtaking, a grand vineyard estate, where soft golden lights draped over the oak trees and a live band played a melody that made your heart ache with nostalgia. The air was filled with the scent of roses and crisp autumn air. I had always been the flirtatious type, effortlessly drawing people into conversation with a smile or a well-placed touch on the arm. It wasn't calculated, I simply enjoyed the attention. And that night, I was feeling particularly radiant. My emerald dress hugged me in all the right places, my hair cascaded in soft waves, and every time I laughed, I could feel eyes lingering on me a little longer than they should. I knew my husband, Ethan, was watching. He always watched. He wasn't the type to make a scene, but his silence could be just as sharp as a blade. Throughout the night, I found myself dancing, laughing, and teasing, nothing inappropriate, of course, but just enough to enjoy the rush of attraction. There was a groomsman, Liam, whom I had known for years. He was charming, with a wicked grin and a penchant for witty banter. We'd always had a playful dynamic, and tonight was no exception. "You're dangerous," he murmured as we swayed to the music. I laughed, tilting my head back. "Oh. And why is that?" "Because you know exactly what you're doing," he said, his fingers ghosting over my wrist. At that moment, I felt Ethan's presence before I even saw him. He was standing by the bar, glass in hand, his jaw tight. Our eyes locked, and for the first time that night, a sliver of unease crept up my spine. When the song ended, I excused myself, making my way towards him. "Ethan, why are you just standing here?" I asked, slipping my arm around his waist. His body was rigid. "I could ask you the same thing." His voice was low, controlled, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. "Are you seriously mad?" I teased, trying to lighten the mood. "I was just having fun." His eyes darkened. "Oh, I know." Something about the way he said it sent a chill through me. And that was when I knew, this night was far from over. Ethan's stare was unreadable, but his fingers tightened around his glass, a telltale sign that he was keeping something restrained. I had seen that look before, but tonight, it felt different. There was something darker behind it. "I don't know what you think you saw," I said, keeping my voice playful, though a sliver of unease curled in my stomach. Ethan didn't blink. He tilted his drink to his lips, took a slow sip of whiskey, and set the glass down with a deliberate clink. "I saw everything I needed to." I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, he turned and walked away. I exhaled, pushing down the strange feeling his words had left behind. I wouldn't let Ethan ruin my night. He had always been the serious one, the one who kept his emotions in check. If he wanted to sulk, fine. I wasn't going to chase after him. Instead, I turned back toward the dance floor. That was when I noticed Liam watching me again. He was leaning casually against one of the tall cocktail tables, a knowing smirk on his lips. Something about the way he looked at me, like he was in on a secret I wasn't yet aware of, made my pulse quicken. "You know," he mused as I stepped closer, "if looks could kill, I'd be dead." I forced a chuckle. "Don't flatter yourself." "Oh, but I think I should," he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Your husband doesn't seem too happy." But then again, he leaned in, his breath warm against my ear. "Men don't get angry over things they don't care about." A shiver ran down my spine. I wasn't sure if it was from the proximity or the truth in his words. The night stretched on in a haze of laughter, music, and stolen glances. But Ethan was nowhere to be found. My stomach twisted, an unfamiliar sensation settling in my chest. I checked my phone. No messages. No missed calls. I told myself I didn't care. But when the reception began to wind down, and the last of the guests started to trickle out, I finally gave in to the nagging feeling that had been clawing at me all night. I stepped outside, where the crisp night air bit at my skin. The gravel crunching under my heels was the only sound in the silence. The estate was vast, with gardens and hidden alcoves where guests had wandered off throughout the evening. And then, in the dim glow of the garden lanterns, I saw him. Ethan. But he wasn't alone. A woman stood with him, her back to me. Her posture was too familiar, the curve of her shoulders, the delicate tilt of her head as she leaned in toward him. I didn't need to see her face to know who it was. Claire. My best friend. My breath hitched. Ethan wasn't the type to flirt, not like I did, at least. But there was something intimate about the way they stood, too close, too comfortable. I watched as Claire reached up, brushing an invisible speck from Ethan's collar. He didn't move away. A strange, suffocating feeling wrapped around my chest. I should have stormed over, demanded to know what was going on. But instead, I froze, hidden in the shadows, my own game suddenly turned against me. Maybe I had been so busy playing with fire that I hadn't noticed the smoke curling around me. Maybe the betrayal had never been mine alone. I stood frozen in the shadows, my breath shallow, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged animal. Claire's fingers lingered on Ethan's collar just a second too long, and something about the way he looked at her, steady, unreadable, sent an icy wave crashing through me. I had spent the night dancing on the edge of danger, toying with attraction, playing my little games. But this wasn't a game. Ethan murmured something, his voice low, too quiet for me to hear. Claire laughed softly, a sound that sent a dagger straight through my stomach. I forced myself forward, my heels clicking against the stone path, shattering the delicate tension between them. Claire turned first, her face shifting from amusement to surprise in an instant. But Ethan, he didn't flinch. Something funny? My voice was sharper than I intended. Claire took a step back, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous tell I'd known since college. Oh. Hey, I wasn't talking to you, I cut her off, my gaze locking onto Ethan's. His jaw tensed, but there was no guilt, no apology in his eyes. We were just talking, Hannah, he said coolly. Talking? I let out a hollow laugh, folding my arms. That's interesting, because it sure didn't look like just talking. Claire swallowed hard, her gaze flicking between us like she was calculating an escape. Maybe I should stay. Ethan's voice was firm, and my stomach turned. I narrowed my eyes. Oh, so now we're giving orders? He exhaled through his nose, like he was losing patience. Like I was the one who had something to explain. Do you even hear yourself? He asked, stepping closer. You spent the entire night throwing yourself at every man who so much as looked at you, and now you're standing here acting like the wounded party? Heat flushed through me, anger and shame twisting together like a poison. Excuse me? You think I didn't notice? He scoffed. The way you let Liam put his hands on you? The way you laughed a little too hard at every joke? You wanted me to react, didn't you? My pulse roared in my ears. Oh, so now I'm responsible for whatever this is? I gestured between him and Claire. Claire held up her hands. Look, this is getting. Shut up, Claire. The words snapped out of me before I could stop them. She flinched, and for a second, guilt warred with my fury. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. You want the truth, Hannah? Fine. Maybe I got tired of playing your little games. His voice was lower now, dangerous. Maybe I wanted to see how it felt to be on the other side of them. A slow, sickening realization settled over me. Is that what this is? I whispered. Payback? Ethan didn't answer. He didn't have to. Claire looked at me, eyes wide with something that could have been regret, but I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. I had spent so long pushing, teasing, testing. And now, I was staring at the consequences. But the worst part? I wasn't sure if I had lost Ethan tonight, or if I had already lost him long ago. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. The weight of Ethan's words coiled around my throat, strangling the breath from my lungs. I wanted to scream, to claw at the betrayal curling like smoke in the cold night air, but I refused to let them see me break. Instead, I laughed. A sharp, brittle sound. So that's what this is? A little taste of my own medicine? Ethan's eyes darkened, a flicker of something dangerous behind them. Call it whatever you want, Hannah. But don't stand there and act like you're innocent. Innocent. The word sent a bitter taste flooding my mouth. Maybe I hadn't been. Maybe I'd pushed too far, tested the limits one too many times. But this was different. This wasn't a game anymore. Claire shifted beside him, her eyes darting between us like she was watching a house of cards collapse in real time. I should go, she murmured, but neither of us acknowledged her. She hesitated for a second before slipping away, her footsteps fading into the night. I waited until she was gone before stepping closer, forcing Ethan to meet my gaze. So, what now? My voice was low, steady, but inside I was unraveling. His lips pressed into a thin line. That depends on you. On me? I let out a sharp breath. You're the one sneaking off with my best friend at my brother's wedding, and somehow this is my decision. He tilted his head, studying me, like he was searching for something beneath my rage. What do you want me to say, Hannah? That I wanted you to see? That I wanted you to feel what I've felt for months? The words slammed into me, knocking the air from my chest. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. And did it work? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan exhaled, rubbing a hand over his jaw. I don't know. I stared at him, at the man I had loved, the man I had tested, the man I had underestimated. I had spent so long thinking I had control. Thinking I could push and pull and flirt my way through life without consequence. But I had been wrong. So wrong. Do you love her? I asked suddenly, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. Don't be ridiculous. Then why? My voice cracked. Why Claire? Why her? For the first time that night, I saw something crack in him, something raw. Because she was there, he admitted. Because she listened. Because she wasn't playing games with me. The truth sliced through me like a blade. I had spent so long trying to prove I didn't need Ethan's validation, that I could have fun, that I could be wanted. But somewhere along the way, I had forgotten that he was watching. That he was keeping score. And now, I was paying the price. A lump formed in my throat, thick and suffocating. So, what happens now? Ethan studied me for a long moment, then shook his head. That's up to you, Hannah. And then, without another word, he turned and walked away. I stood there, the cold seeping into my bones, the laughter and music of the wedding drifting in from the reception hall like a cruel reminder of everything I had just lost. I had played with fire. And I had been burned. I stood there, frozen in the darkness, watching Ethan's silhouette disappear into the estate. The cold air pressed against my skin, but it was nothing compared to the icy realization creeping through my veins. This was it. The moment where all my games, my teasing, my careless flirtations came crashing down around me. I had never thought Ethan would walk away. Not really. He had always been steady, the one thing in my life that never wavered, no matter how hard I pushed him. But tonight, I had seen something in his eyes I had never seen before. Resignation. It was over. The thought sent a sharp, aching pain through my chest, more unbearable than any fiery argument or jealous outburst. I wanted to scream, to chase after him, to demand that he fight for me the way he always had. But how could I ask that of him? I had spent years testing the limits of his love, seeing how far I could go before he snapped. And now, I had my answer. The truth hit me with a force that nearly brought me to my knees. I had taken him for granted. All the little jabs, the casual dismissals, the way I had laughed when others admired him but never told him how proud I was of him. I had spent so much time trying to prove my worth, trying to be desired, that I had overlooked the one person who had chosen me, over and over again, without hesitation. And now, I had lost him. I turned back toward the reception hall, the sounds of celebration still spilling out into the night. My brother was probably making his final toast, the guests were dancing, and somewhere in the crowd, Claire was pretending like nothing had happened. But I couldn't go back inside. I couldn't return to the woman I had been at the start of the evening. The woman who thrived on attention, who played with fire just to see if she could. Because tonight, I had learned what it meant to lose. I had always thought love was about control. About power. But it wasn't. Love was about trust. Love was about choosing someone even when it wasn't easy, even when it felt unfair. And I had broken that trust. The realization settled deep into my bones, heavier than anything I had ever felt. I didn't know if Ethan would come home tonight. I didn't know if I would get another chance to make things right. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about how I could win. I was thinking about how I had lost something I might never get back. And that terrified me more than anything.